Speaking, describe image guided practice session. Let's start. Here's your first image. Here's a sample response. The image describes various types of coffees in Australia. Espresso is the simplest with only a shot of espresso. If the shot is doubled, it becomes a doppio. Adding water to espresso makes it a long black, while adding some milk foam makes it a macchiato. Adding steamed milk and some foam gives us a latte. Other types can be obtained by the combination of milk foam, steamed milk, and chocolate powder. It can be concluded that Australian people enjoy a wide variety of coffee drinks. So if you look at the image, this is not a graph, this is not a standard type of picture. So this is just an image, or you can also say this is an infographic. There's an image that's there to convey some information. Read the title. So it is Newcomer's Guide to Coffee in Australia. And when you read the titles, the other text, you can see it's different types of coffee. And then the diagram tells you what goes inside them. That there's espresso, there is two espresso, there's espresso and water, etc. Essentially, that forms the core of your response then. So you start with the first one, and you can also see that let's start with like simple, just espresso, and then go on to more sophisticated and complicated. So that sort of guides you. So you start with espresso is the simplest with only a shot of espresso. Okay. If let's say you're not very familiar with your coffees and you can't use, you don't want to say only a shot of espresso or it doesn't come to your mind, then a simple sentence like espresso is simply a coffee which has some espresso in it. That would also be fine. My point is that don't think too much. Okay. Some of us are coffee addicts. We know a lot. So to people like those, this graphic will make immediate sense, but to others, this will be quite challenging. So you express what you can. That's what I'm trying to say. So we started with espresso and then we noticed that there are two espressos in the next coffee and then other things are added to other coffees. And that is what we have mentioned. And in the last sentence, other types can be obtained by combination of foam, steamed milk, chocolate powder, etc. What we did, we have just combine them together because this is a basic principle how we answer these describe image questions, right? The points which are similar, we club them together. And what's the conclusion? Different ways. Now, this is specific to coffee in Australia. So it can be concluded that Australians enjoy a wide variety of coffee drinks, or you can say it can be concluded that coffee can range from a simple espresso to a very complicated mocha. Different types of, or you can say it can be concluded that there are many types of coffees in Australia. Or you can say that in conclusion, the infographic is a very good guide for a newcomer to learn about coffee in Australia. So you see, there are different ways you can make a conclusion, provided you keep your focus and you keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate, don't think too much. If you can understand, if you can see the trends and how the points connect to each other in the image, use that. Otherwise, you focus on reading what's there and just form sentences based upon that. Here's the second question. The image. Here's the sample response. The image provides 34 important tips for doing well in a job interview. About 33% hiring managers decide to hire or not in the first 90 seconds. So it's important to do well at the interview. Among the common mistakes, 67% interviews do not make eye contact, while 47% go in without knowing much about the company. Others fail to smile, have a bad posture, or keep fidgeting during the interview. It's important to dress well as it makes 55% of the first impression and speak properly. In conclusion, taking care of these things helps to do well in an interview. Again, this is an infographic. It's not a straightforward graph or a table or a chart. So that's the type of the image. You can just say an image or an infographic or even a picture. The title is 34 Crucial Tips for Your Next Job Interview. And we will use that in forming our first sentence because that's what we do in the first sentence. We tell what the image is about. So this image provides 34 important tips for doing well in a job interview. Instead of crucial, it changed the word to important. So try not to speak whatever as it is that you read from the image. If possible, substitute with other words. And then if you can, you see common non-verbal mistakes made during job interviews, and there's also 30 that claim to know whether or not they would hire someone within 90 seconds. So that's a good point because it highlights the importance of taking care of all of these things. So that's why that's the next point. And after that, we talk about the main mistakes and we begin with the biggest, that is failure to make eye contact and then having no knowledge of the company. The remaining three, we just club them together. On the right-hand side, there's a discussion of how to make a good first impression. So we add a sentence for that as well, that it's important to dress well as it makes 45% of the first impression and to speak properly. Conclusion then, so we can conclude, either we can say that in conclusion, their non-verbal communication is very important in a job interview, or we can say in conclusion, the image give very useful tips for doing well in a job interview, or we can just say that in conclusion, taking care of these things helps to do well in an interview. Okay. When you do your practice, there are two things that you need to understand. One, what is your target score? And what's your current level? Now, based upon that, you can then decide what kind of responses you will try to make. If your target score is 80, then you must cover all the key points, make a good introduction, give a proper conclusion, speak fluently, try to maintain good pronunciation. If your target score, for example, is 60, then you can get away by, as long as the structure is all right, you can make a generic conclusion out of all the information. You can even read something that is in front of you and you'll still get away with that. That's why always have it. First thing, you must know what you are aiming for. And then when you're practicing, you have to try to respond to that level. Okay. I mean, if your target score is 60, then you don't need to trouble yourselves by thinking, I'm not able to make good conclusions. My points are not always the best, because that's fine. As long as you get your target score, why bother? But if you really need a high score, then yes, you have to put yourself through the pain. If you're not at that level, you have to go through, you have to learn, you have to practice more. So that is another thing that you should pay attention to when you are practicing, like trying to understand your level, keep your target score in mind. The next question, here's the image. Here's a sample response. The bar graph shows how the most successful and least successful content marketers rank on various parameters. 93% of most successful and only 35 of least successful marketers regard organization commitment as a key factor. Most successful marketers also agree that content marketing should have the support of senior executives in the organization. Successful marketers use personas, use technology to get audience insights, and measure content marketing ROI. Least successful marketers rate low on all these factors, ranging from just 5% to 40%. It can be concluded that the success in content marketing is directly proportional to following these principles. All right, so you look at the image and you can see it's a bar graph. Two types of bars, green and pink, most successful and least successful. The title tells you what the graph is about. It's about the characteristics of the most successful content marketers. And then there's a comparison between successful marketers and least successful marketers. And there are different parameters. So against each set of bars, there's a parameter like organization is extremely or very committed to content marketing. So this might look a bit challenging because there's a lot of information in front of you, but actually this is a simple question because it's just a bar graph and there are you're comparing the most successful marketers with the least successful marketers against a set of parameters, how and when they do, how they do their marketing activities. So the first sentence, the bar graph shows or compares how the most successful and least successful content marketers rank on various parameters. And then you start with the highest, which is 93%. So 93% of the most successful, whereas only 35% of the least successful think that organization is extremely committed to marketing. That's important. And then the next point, again, that's 92%. So that's a high point. And you don't always need to mention the percentages. For example, in the next point, we've just said that most successful marketers also agree that content marketing should have the support or the buy-in from highest levels in their organization. And we have rephrased it. So instead of saying buy-in from highest levels, we have said support of senior executives in the organization. So that just sounds better. And we haven't read just what's in front of us. And after that, we try to group the similar points together. So 77, 73, 72, etc. They're similar. And in the conclusion, we can say that success in content marketing is directly proportional to following these principles, to following all these 7 principles that determines the success. What other kind of conclusion you can make? It can be concluded that the most successful and least successful marketers approach their work very differently. Or it can be concluded that the least successful marketers don't give importance to some very key marketing aspects. Again, as I said, there are different ways. Depending upon your target score, you should try to make a response like that. The final question, here's the image. Here's a sample response. The diagram describes how an earthquake impacted whole of Japan. The earthquake originated 682 kilometers below the surface in the Pacific Plate. This led to the seismic waves impacting the Philippine Sea Plate. This in turn led to the shaking of the land plate across whole of Japan. In conclusion, even a seismic event deep under the earth can have far-reaching consequences on the surface. So now this is a diagram because it describes how something happened, different parts of it. It has labels, and that's what a diagram is. And you read the title, How Earthquake Deep Inside Pacific Plate Shook All of Japan. So the way we frame our first sentence, we say the diagram describes how an earthquake impacted whole of Japan. So instead of saying shook, we said impacted whole of Japan. And then when you are describing a diagram, you do it in a systematic manner because there's always some order in the way the information is displayed in a diagram. And here, as you can see, the arrows, they're starting from the point where we have a cross. So it says, and it's on that brown colored plate that has been labeled as Pacific Plate. So our first point will start from there. The earthquake originated 682 kilometers deep below the surface in the Pacific Plate. And then, as you can see, the waves, they pushed the Philippine Sea Plate and they traveled into the seismic waves, they traveled into Japan. So that's what our next points are. This led to the seismic waves impacting the Philippine Sea Plate. This in turn led to the shaking of the land plate across whole of Japan. So what can be the conclusion? It can be concluded that a single earthquake in Pacific Plate can have big impact on all of Japan. Or a more smarter conclusion, even a seismic event deep under the earth can have far-reaching impact or far-reaching consequences on the surface. Okay, so you have this and you have the structure in mind, and then, as we say, speak confidently. I hope that when you are practicing these questions, it's a good idea to record them in your mobile phone because it's easy. You can just take it in your hand and record it and play and see the response. So try to understand a couple of things. One, are you able to capture all the key points? That is, how good is the content in your response? And then also try to understand how good your pronunciation and fluency is. So you need to do well on all three parameters to get full marks in these questions. And I'm sure if you do sincere practice, you will be able to do that.